Some areas that I see already that people are hitting on that I want to point out now so you can pay attention to them as you're working. The number one thing that is going to happen, and this isn't just you guys, it even happens like in the advanced classes and the other ones, is when you extrude something. So we've already gotten to the point where we're grabbing faces, that's no big deal, and we're extruding stuff. When we go up to that menu and we say extrude, something has happened to it. So I clicked on extrude, it extruded, okay? Even though we don't see anything happen except for that little tool change, there's actually right now faces on top of faces. So if I deselect this, just to show you, okay, you can see how it's kind of like a patch there. On the sphere, it makes it very obvious. On a cube, it's not so obvious. All right, so as I grab the vertices for this and I start moving it around, you can see that there are indeed faces right here that are kind of hidden. Okay, now big deal, so what, who cares? But let's say now we go in here and we grab these faces again, and then we extrude it because it didn't work correctly. And then we say, whoops, we didn't select it right. Let's grab it again, extrude it, and then we pull it off again. Okay, so I've extruded it 3 times to get this shape. When I go into smoothing it, you can see the kind of shape that this is getting. It's not creating a smooth transition from one to the other. If I go over here and I extrude this and pull it out, you can see the kind of transition that I should be getting here, but I'm not getting it there, okay? So we just have to be aware of this, that every time we extrude, that it's actually extruding, it's actually doing something to that surface. And we can kind of keep an eye on that in the channel box, okay? So as I click on this surface and as I start going through these things and I start extruding, you can see how we have a poly extrude, poly extrude, poly extrude, poly extrude. Every time we extrude, we're going to get a new one, okay? So it's always best to, as you're working and you extrude it, make sure you're not creating extra ones. If you know that you have a cube, you've extruded it once, but over here you have 15 extrudes, something went wrong, okay? And it really becomes obvious when we get into an issue like with the desk. Subdivisions here, subdivisions there we go. So I'm just going to grab a chunk of these like this, and let's say I extrude this and then I don't move it, and then I click them again and I extrude that and I pull it up, and then I extrude it and pull it up, and then I try to do something to this, and then I start getting this really funky behavior here where this isn't supposed to be there, and it just doesn't really match what it's supposed to do, okay? So you will start to see this kind of thing happen, and if you can do it, the easiest thing to do is just undo until you get back to just having the one extrude and then pulling that one extrude up, okay? Or what you can do is delete the faces off, so you can actually just go through and delete faces. And this is a little bit more of an advanced thing, but we can use this append tool, append to polygon tool. And I could literally just kind of click on these edges here. Oops. Click on this edge, click on this edge, click on this edge, click on that edge. And I can remake this thing. Eventually we'll get into using this append tool a bit more. But for right now, I just kind of remade that, just kind of deleted the stuff that was garbage, rebuilt it. And I can use this interactive split tool to put these things back in. So now it's back to exactly where it was before. And now I could grab these and extrude and not have any issue.
So what if you extrude something and then you get off the menu? Is there any way to get back to that extrude?
Yes. If we click off of this and that tool is gone, what we can do is just click on the surface, click on this poly extrude, and then if this tool doesn't show up when we do that, all we would have to do, like right now it doesn't show up, even though I clicked on it, I would hit the T key or this key right here. When we were going through our tools, this show manipulator, which is right here, is the one that allows us to manipulate that, okay? Even after the fact, even if I had, let's say I pulled this like this, and then I went through and grabbed and extruded that, and then I extruded this and kind of shrunk it down. I extruded that and did this, extruded this and did that. Okay? Even after the fact, I can always come back to that very first extrude that I did right here. And I could, let's say, shrink the whole thing down. And the history on here is going to update and it'll shrink everything else down. It'll say, okay, if you shrunk the first one down, then the second one's also going to be shrunk, and the third one, and the fourth one, and all of them. And it's doing something funky up here, which is kind of odd, but yes, it was. And now it's not doing it. There it goes. All right, and sometimes it just kind of freaks out because I've gone too far back into history to do anything. All right, but it's a cool way to be able to manipulate this kind of stuff because you can still manipulate it even after the fact and play with the settings that way. Okay, so any questions about the extrude part of that? No, okay. So hopefully we won't have too many issues like that in the future. Most likely we will. The other thing that we're going to be dealing with is organization. This is going to be a huge one as we get further and further into the assignments, okay? Because some of the assignments, like right now we have desk, we have chair, we have book. Those are three main things. But sometimes you'll have, like for our pencil holder that we're creating in the next lecture, you're going to have a cup and you're going to have a whole bunch of pencils in there. So you want to make sure that stuff is staying organized, all right? And we want to keep it organized in not just one spot, but in several spots. We've shown the outliner before, window outliner, which is this guy. And this, like I said, it lists all the stuff that we have in our scene. Every single object that we've created, it lists it there. All right, so let's pretend that this is a pencil holder right here. And we'll just shove this over there. There you go. All right. So we'll pretend that these objects are all supposed to be moved together, okay? So if I have all these objects, I want them to always move together. They're always part of that same group. Then I want to make sure that I group them using Control-G, okay? And then I can put the pivot wherever I need to put the pivot. And now I have a group over here. Now I don't want to leave it called group. I want to make sure I label it. So I would double click it here and call it box group or whatever, okay? Or I could click over here in the channel box and label it here cube group, okay? And then down here, I don't have to group these because they're just individual objects. I grouped this one because that one is a collection of things. I don't need to group all the books together. I could just for organization. But I would typically, like the pencil and the pencil holder, group all that stuff together. Trying to think what else we have. Our globe that we're going to create, that would also all be grouped together because we would move that as an entity. We wouldn't move it as just one object at a time. All right. We could grab all this stuff and move it, and you see that it works. But realistically, I want to make sure I grab the group in the outliner and then move it because that's going to give me cleaner movements over here. All right. So that's one spot, just kind of organizing it like this, saying, you know, this one would be cube left, cube mid, and cube right. And then we also want to organize things down here in the layers. Remember, the layers don't work like Photoshop. They don't work in a stacking order. It's just a matter of, you know, organizational purposes. We can hide stuff. So I'm going to grab my cube group and I'm going to make a new layer. So I click on the cube group, I click on new layer, and I give this a name, cube group layer. Okay. I can't label, because of how Maya works internally, I can't label it cube group and have this thing called cube group as well, because it's two things that are named the same thing. So I always put the little layer thing over there. All right, and then these things down here, I can just call those bottom boxes, whatever. And save. Okay, so now I have these two and I have this one, and I could hide these or turn these on or off or whatever. If you're dealing with an entire scene where you have 1,000 objects in there, these layers become incredibly handy. Also, you can use it to isolate things. Like, I know that I'm not going to work on these things. I want to keep these exactly where they are, but I also don't want to accidentally select them. So I can go there and I could either hide them, that way I don't select them, or I could go to this second box and make them templated. Template means it's always going to be in wireframe and always going to be non-selectable, so I can't select these now. If I click the button again, it makes it referenced, meaning that it's shaded mode and I can't select them. All right, so it's always in what you kind of want that to be. I can still select this stuff, but not that stuff. Okay. Now here's the tricky part about this too, is that let's say I grab these objects and I put them on a new layer called separate boxes, and I hit save. Okay. If I hide separate boxes, you see that the boxes go away. If I turn off the cube group layer, the boxes also go away. Okay, now the reason that can work is because the group is on one layer, the individual items are on another layer. So you have to be careful with that you don't accidentally put something on the wrong layer that you don't want it to. Okay, you could also grab these things and you could right click on this and you could remove objects. You can select objects if you're not sure what's on it. You can delete the layer and remake it or whatever. All right, and the cool thing is too that you can double click these and you can start coloring these things. Okay, we're not going to see any difference now, except when I go to wireframe. I don't know why that's not working. Oh, because it's not on the layer? No, it is. Oh, because individual objects are not on this layer. All right, so now I can see the different color that's part of these. So that can just be another handy thing, just something that's helpful just to kind of help you stay organized as well. Once we start creating materials, which won't be for a couple lectures, we'll also be keeping our materials organized as well. Okay, so and when you turn your assignments in, I am looking through these. I am going to look through your scene file and make sure that everything over here is organized. Make sure everything here is organized. Make sure that I can turn every single thing off on your layers and see nothing in the scene. That's our goal, is that everything is organized so we can turn everything off and see nothing in the scene. That way we know that everything's organized. If I need to grab your pencil, I know that inside here I can find the pencil. All right. When we get to other assignments, we're not going to go into crazy amounts of detail. Our next assignment that we're going to do in a few weeks is probably going to have like 100 different surfaces associated with it. Okay, so we don't need to go through and assign a name to each one of those. We can just group things and keep the group named. That way it makes more sense. Okay. Also make sure that you're saving your work as you go. Oops. So save it incrementally. I've talked about this before a little bit, so you can say file 1, wherever you're working on, chairs done, _01, okay, or 02 or 03, or however you want to do it. Don't rely on a single file, because if that single file becomes corrupt, and it has before, you lose all your work and you have to start all over again, okay? Also make sure you're backing your stuff up onto your thumb drives, onto the server, wherever you need to, just to make sure that you have it. Especially with this cold weather, if you leave your thumb drive in your bag and leave your bag in your car, that could get to the point where it gets so cold, you bring it into a warm area, moisture builds up, and it destroys it, okay? So just be careful with all your backups and make sure you're taking care of your things. All right, I think that's it. Yes. Any questions on the stuff I went over? Yes, ma'am.
Where'd you get that left-hand box from?
This outliner under Window Outliner,
Okay.
or we added it to our shelf. It's the Out L1.
I'm
Yes, ma'am.
curious, like if you, can you make something in like a different scene and then bring it into a different scene?
Yes, you can. We can actually take and do an import or export. So if I say in this scene I like what I've done here, I can export these boxes out, bring it into a new scene just by importing it.
Okay.
You could also do a copy-paste. That works too. I don't like to use copy-paste. I prefer import-export. It's my own preference. Okay, anything else? No? Okay. All right, very good. I will let you continue working.